Whenever you're ready. So welcome back, guys, to the Utmost Sincerity podcast. Thank you for coming back, listening to us. This week we have a guest with us this week. We're very excited to have our guest. First, let me do my check-in. Coop, how you feeling?
Doing good, bro. You?
Hey, man, I'm living. I'm living.
Hey, any day above ground, bro.
Any day above ground is a good day. So yeah, guys. So we got a guest with us today. I'm gonna let him introduce himself. I'm very humbled and grateful that he took his time out to come speak with us and speak to you guys. He is a leader. He is my mentor. He is my friend. He is my brother. And I'm gonna let him introduce himself.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, and first of all, I want to give thanks to the Lord for allowing all us to be here today.
Amen. That's right.
Amen.
It's been a very trying year, been a very interesting year, 2020, and I want to thank the two of you gentlemen, who I've had the pleasure of both working with and fellowshipping with, and
That's right.
being able to have conversations even prior to today.
Yes, sir.
So I just thank you for considering me to come on and have some conversation about some of the things that we're seeing unfold before our eyes in society, and more importantly, how those things are impacting our lives and the lives of our families,
Yes, sir.
our communities, and our coworkers.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. So we have my former supervisor, my mentor, former police officer, sergeant, former chief of police as well, Mr. Donovan Brooks.
Yes, sir.
So so I call you Chief Brooks. I call you Chief. I call him Chief. So Chief, just kind of like give a like a little overview of just about you.
Well, I'm a native Baltimorean.
That's right. Yeah.
And my time growing up was split between the Park Heights community, and then later on in Northeast Baltimore and like the Northwood community. So I had pretty robust experiences in both communities growing up, and after graduating from high school, I worked a little bit, and then I decided to join the Air Force. In high school, I spent some time in Air Force ROTC, so it was kind of like no-brainer, seamless type of transition for me when I made that decision as a young man. So I did just under 10 years active duty in the Air Force and returned home. And I had an interest in law enforcement because it's actually what I did during my tenure in the Air Force. I did some things outside of law enforcement in the Air Force. I was blessed enough to be a member of the Air Force Presidential Honor Guard for 4 years.
Yeah. Wow.
So doing presidential support and things of that nature. And that experience in the Air Force really kind of helped to unlock my understanding of the world around me. And when I returned to Baltimore, I wanted to continue in the pathway of law enforcement. And so my sister was a Baltimore City School police officer. I really had an interest in federal law enforcement. But local agencies came knocking first, the first of which was Baltimore City School Police. So I was hired and went through the Baltimore City Police Academy and started my career with the Baltimore City School Police. And it was a very fun, challenging, enlightening experience for over 20 years.
Wow.
During that time period, I was hired as a part-time chief of police for a small municipality in Prince George's County. And that experience, did that for roughly 2.5 years, and that experience really opened my eyes more to the responsibilities of policing from a leadership position, and the responsibility to community, and the type of engagement. So, and I tell you, here's what I really learned is when you become the chief of police for a small municipal police department.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I say small, we've only budgeted for 10 officers. And by the way,
Wow.
just for your listening audience, so they can kind of get a grasp, 85% of law enforcement agencies throughout the United States are considered small to medium-sized police departments.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
So large police departments like Baltimore City, Chicago, New York, police departments with 3,000 officers, 2,500 officers,
Mm-hmm.
they make up like 15%, right? So when you think about the state of Maryland, when you think about your large agencies like Prince George's County Police or Baltimore City Police, right?
Right.
They are large departments in a sea of small departments,
Wow,
right?
yep,
So
yeah,
you think
yep.
about Prince George's County by itself. So that's one county by itself. And you're talking about over 22, 23
Right.
municipal police departments.
Right.
And most of these police departments are operating with maybe 25 or fewer police officers.
Mm.
So my point is this. When you are in a leadership position of a small agency, you have to do a lot more.
Yeah.
There's a lot less delegation.
I can see that.
And because there's a lot less delegation, you're forced to learn
Mm.
a lot of things. So whereas large department chiefs, and this isn't to take anything away from them because they've ascended to those positions,
Right.
mostly based on, on their skill,
Right.
on their talent, their
Mhm.
knowledge. However, I didn't have anybody to just hand something and say,
Right. Yeah.
you're my procurement officer, so
Uh-huh.
take care of
Yeah.
ordering these new vests and
Yeah.
Right.
this equipment. Like I was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have 2 or 3 colonels, right?
You're right.
I had to take off the chief hat and put on the colonel
Colonel
hat.
hat.
Yeah, you did it all.
I had to do it all. So that experience in running a small municipal police department really broadened my knowledge base.
Mm.
But more importantly, it constantly kept me in direct contact with the community
Mm.
and the officers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a good
I
point.
was never
Yeah.
removed from either, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Of those parties, the community, political leadership, community leaders, children, and the officers who served under me.
Yeah.
Right. There was never a disconnect.
Okay.
So
Mm.
that
That's a
there
good
was
point.
there was
Yeah.
great value in that to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah. So
Very much.
so I did a little over 20 years with the Baltimore City School Police, and then I did the 2 years as the chief of the municipality in Prince George's County, and I'm retired, and I'm still I've returned to work, so I enjoy what I do.
Mhm.
Return back to work in the field of safety and security, and so I just kind of enjoy what I do, and just keeping my finger on the pulse of what's going on in
Yeah.
law enforcement
Right.
and police and community engagement.
Yeah.
And so, that's where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Chief, there was also a point in time where you had other aspirations, doing our tenure of,
Right.
helping to trying to make change to the city of Baltimore.
Yeah,
Right.
You want to
Right.
give a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, when one of the reasons I left the position of chief where I was because I saw things going on in my city here,
Mhm.
Right.
and I'm very thankful for the mayor and the council and the citizens of the town of Fairmount Heights, where I was the
Right.
chief,
Yeah.
for giving me that executive level opportunity. I started to notice things in my city with respect to police and community engagement.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I also started to notice there was this huge disconnect developing. And I decided that I wanted to run for sheriff of Baltimore City.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
So in 2012, I started to put together some exploratory operations to see what the opportunity was
Mhm.
and what the chance was to run a viable candidacy for that seat.
Mhm.
And after a period of exploring with some close family members and team members, I decided to. So in 2013,
Mhm.
I resigned my position from the chief's position. I still maintain my job
That's right.
with
Right.
Yeah.
Baltimore City School Police, and started my campaign for Sheriff of Baltimore. And I'll tell you what's interesting. I was looking at some old video of the campaign, and I've had some people reach out to me,
Right.
and they say, you have video from 2012 and 2013
Ahead of your time.
where you were talking about police reform.
Yes, you was.
You
You
know?
absolutely was.
And I said, yeah, because that was really my platform. So for those who remember my campaign, when I actually came out the gate in 2012 to make the announcement, I came out of the gate talking about the need for police reform.
Yes.
The need for the improvement of police and community engagement.
Very much
and
so.
One of my mentors said to me recently, because we had a very robust conversation, and he said, I think maybe you were just some years ahead of your time, because this was before Freddie Gray.
Yes, it
was.
Yep,
definitely was.
And this is before Eric Gardner.
Yeah, it was. Yep.
All right, and I saw the trajectory.
Uh-huh.
And you know what helped me see that trajectory? The fact that for several hours out of the day, I was removed from my normal policing environment, and I was placed front and center in my chief of police environment, and I said, we're doing things differently down here than what I'm experiencing back home.
Yep.
Right.
So maybe some of the experience I've gained, the knowledge I've gained, and the understanding I've gained, maybe I can take that back up the road to my own city.
Right.
And maybe I can seize an opportunity to lead an agency of men and women, right? And maybe have an impact on the trajectory of where I see police and community engagement, where I see how this thing is starting to slowly evolve.
Yeah, you sort of writing on the wall.
And to this contention, this us against them.
Right.
And then of course there are historical implications as to why. Right. There's kind of an inherent us against them when you start talking about the black community and policing. Right.
Yeah,
so we can't ignore those historical perspectives. I mean, because they exist.
And
we didn't create them.
No, not at all.
And
not
so they should never be the pink elephant in the room.
Right.
Something that you don't create, and something that you were not the architect of, should never be off limits to be able to talk about when you're trying to improve or change it. Right. But so often topics that we don't create, that we don't originate, somehow become the pink elephant in the room.
Right.
And so I resisted that, which is part of the reason why I decided to run for sheriff. Like, I really wanted to be able to impact that engagement. Now, what I'll say about policing is, while you might not be the architect that designed some of the things
we about to go to church on this one. We going to church
that are counterproductive to the community. While we may not be the architects in law enforcement,
that's right,
we can be the purveyors of continuance of that behavior.
That's true.
That inherent feeling and belief that people have, and so we have a responsibility not to continue to perpetuate those things.
Yes.
But you can't just talk about that stuff.
Right.
You got to have leaders that are invested and who are all in and who are willing to take the punches.
Yeah.
Because you're going to take some punches.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about it.
But part of the reason that I wanted to be a sheriff is because of Baltimore City.
Right.
Because I also understood the dynamics, right? And the nexus between those two levels of leadership, being a chief and being a sheriff. When you're a chief, you're beholden to the public and the community, but you're also beholden to the executive level leadership.
Yes, you are.
You're also beholden to the political leadership of that municipality.
Right.
And you didn't create that, but it's some things you got to consider.
Right.
Well, when you're the sheriff, you're beholden to the people.
Yeah.
You coalesce with other politicians.
That's true.
You coalesce with other elected officials.
Yeah.
But you hold an office the same way that they hold an office. You were sent to that position by the vote of the people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The people install you to that office.
Right.
The people install you into that seat.
Right.
And I say this jokingly sometimes to my friends when I talk about it, and family members. When they say, what's the difference between the chief or the commissioner and the sheriff? Well, I'll tell you the difference. Let's just keep it in plain English. If a chief or commissioner is well-intentioned but says the wrong thing on a news broadcast on Friday, and it rubs the executive level leadership or the political structure the wrong way, he could be called in Monday and told,
Yeah.
Despite your best efforts, your services are no longer needed.
See you later, sir.
Have a good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
As evidenced by David Clark, sheriff from out of Milwaukee.
Right.
Right. And I'm not even saying this because I'm a fan, but I'm just telling you the facts.
Yeah. Right.
As a sheriff, you say what you want to say, well-intentioned.
Right.
And in some cases not. But let's operate from a positive premise. You say what you need to say, and you say what's important.
Right.
And you say what's factual on Friday. And there's nobody who can call you into their office on Monday.
There you go. That's right.
True.
And say, although what you said was right, Sheriff, it didn't make me feel good as an elected official. And because it didn't make me feel good, you got to go. You can't do that to a sheriff.
You can't do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a great point.
And again, that's evidenced by David Clark because David Clark Sheriff Clark first came on my radar some years ago when I was just on a computer and something popped up on YouTube where this guy was telling people to go arm themselves because the police were being cut and the budget was being cut. So he told the citizens, listen, my people might not be able to get to you in time, but if you're under duress and someone is trying to inflict serious harm, then you might want to go get trained and get a weapon. And he actually put a robocall out to the citizens.
Wow.
Right?
Oh, man.
Now you can imagine. Now what police chief or commissioner?
You already know that's not happening.
Who's going to do that?
That's not happening.
That's political. That's all kinds of suicide.
Career
suicide, political suicide.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's kind of a recap. And unfortunately, at that time, the citizens of Baltimore, decided that they were okay with the current sheriff. They were okay with, what things were. So I wasn't elected sheriff, but like most things in my life, there were a lot of lessons. There were a lot of takeaways, and there was a lot of value in running and meeting the people that I met and understanding the political process of Baltimore City and all the nuances that go with that. So it was all a good experience for me, and it all added to my learning curve.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
As far as like policing now, because I'm gonna call you the GOAT. Those of you who don't know the GOAT, those of you who don't know what the GOAT is, the greatest of all time. Okay,
I can't take
all right.
that. I can't take that.
Like during my time as school police, I learned a lot from Chief Brooks. I always liked the way he carried himself and the way he handled things. So.
Before we even get on to that, we gotta give people their roses while they still here.
Yes, indeed.
So I'm gonna tell you, Chief, you definitely was one of those leaders that spoke up when things wasn't right.
True, so true.
When it wasn't fair, right? And you was just fair. Yeah. You was always fair, but you always spoke up.
True.
None of that that he say she say stuff. You never played into that, Chief.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from you.
True.
And the reason I got promoted to sergeant status was because of you. And I thank you and I appreciate you. And so when Coop says that, for real, you brought a different mindset. You was absolutely a transformational leader.
No, thank you.
Absolutely,
Definitely
and still is
was.
to this day.
Yeah,
thank you.
So I just wanted to say that while we was on it. Go ahead, Coop.
Yeah, because that's one thing we big on. We, a lot of time we commend people after they're gone. Right. We me and Randy are big on while the person is still here, we're gonna give them their roses while they're still here. From me to you, from Randy to you, definitely we learned a lot.
I thank both of you. I appreciate that.
But like I said, as far as policing right now, and we all see the current state, especially being a black man in this profession. How do you see things really going as far as us?
Well, right now, policing is it's undoubtedly in a state of turmoil.
Right.
Mainly in urban areas. However, with these global protests that we've seen,
right?
Because make no mistake about it, in the aftermath of George Floyd,
right,
we saw protests on I think all but one continent, and that was Antarctica.
Right.
There were protests in the aftermath of his death at the hands of police while in police custody,
right,
on every single continent. If my research and historical facts are correct, and so there is a huge magnifying glass and there's a huge spotlight on policing right now.
Yeah.
And here's what I can assure you. Society is changing the way that it's policed.
Yeah.
And so and as much as we see the protests at the local level, there has been a lot of convening of lawmakers, elected officials, who are taking a look at policy, who are taking a look at laws, and who are codifying new laws, right? And abolishing. In some cases, they're not modifying. In some states, they've abolished certain things when it comes to police and community engagement. I mean, Minnesota is talking about what?
Disbanding.
Yeah, disbanding.
Yeah.
And we saw that happen in Camden, New Jersey, right away.
Right.
You know, they didn't reform police. They disbanded the police department. Now, I'll tell you, I'm still a law enforcement professional.
Right.
Right. And so, but I'm always a citizen.
Right.
And so when you wear both of those lenses,
That's a good point.
There has to be some balance and some duality on how you see all of this.
That's true.
All of this stuff, right? So I am not, in as much as I am in favor of police accountability,
right,
I am not in favor of disbanding police.
True.
Okay.
True.
Because I'm not in favor of not allowing victims to have access to the criminal justice system.
That's
right.
That's right.
You know?
Right.
You know, in as much as people who are criminal minded, who have nefarious intentions, must be held accountable.
Right.
Victims must have access to justice, and policing is a part of the whole criminal justice model.
True.
When you talk about policing, and you talk about courts, and you talk about corrections, so it's a part of the whole encompassing model of criminal justice.
Right. Right.
Now, there are lots of reasons that we're seeing some of the things that we're seeing. But when we deal specifically with policing, and you all know this, sometimes within the field of policing, police can be their own worst enemy.
True.
That's right.
It's true.
Sometimes within the field of policing are carrying out edicts that are established by elected officials sometimes, right? And these are the things that are tough for chiefs to talk about.
Right.
When you're a chief of a municipal police department, when you are a commissioner.
True.
You know, let's not play with this. These are they have to really walk a tight line when dealing with these issues. It's not to say that they can't deal with these issues. But one of the things that I saw some years ago, when I started to immerse myself deeper into the career field and the knowledge of what my craft was, I started to realize that there was a level of incompetency, and that level of incompetency in the career field, right, started to breed more incompetency, because, and then there was this level of disdain as well. Right, so people talk about the culture of policing and how that culture is established. So let's be real rudimentary about this. If I'm a street cop, which by the way we all were told the same thing, forget all that stuff you learn in the academy, because it doesn't go down like that in the street, in real life and in the street, right? But here's where you have these cultures. First of all, let's talk about the foundational culture of policing. Police were the enforcers of segregation laws.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I'm not talking about segregation beliefs or some ideological segregation viewpoint. I'm talking about laws.
Right.
Established laws in this country that prohibited blacks from participating in certain activities, that prohibited the rights of blacks, prohibited blacks from being and specifically living in certain communities. Right. So when you pass laws, right, and those laws have criminal implications, whether those laws are good laws or bad laws, police officers are the enforcers. Right.
Well, then,
So when you get into the core of this conversation, there's so many areas, and we don't even have enough time today. There's so many areas that are unescapable.
Right.
But a lot of times people want to escape those areas when you start to talk about policing at its core, at its genesis. You know. So, but let's fast forward to 2020. So, if you have a cop that's out on the street and he's patted on the back because he so-called goes out, he kicks ass and takes names. Right. And he's a go-getter and he's a charger. Right. If nobody's checking whether or not he's violating the constitutional rights, civil rights, or human rights of people, but they just know that he's a go-getter.
He's a go-getter.
He gets the stats.
He
He gets the numbers. You know, he kicks ass and takes names.
Right.
Well, at some point, this person may be elevated to maybe the next level of supervision is sergeant. So he goes from officer to sergeant. So now he has a squad.
Right.
And the expectation of his squad, right?
Talk about it. Yeah.
is an embodiment of who he is, right?
True. So true.
So when we do roll call, I end roll call by like, hey, this squad, what we do is we go out and we kick ass and we take names.
Right.
And now I'm a sergeant, and now I got 6-7 guys and young ladies who I have influence over.
Right.
Who I evaluate. You know? And so now my squad goes out, right, and they become the squad that kicks ass and takes names. Right.
So now you got a full squad of them.
Yeah. But then maybe at some point I ascend to lieutenant.
Yes.
So now I got me 4 or 5 sergeants.
Exactly.
And so my message to those 4 or 5 sergeants is, you know, under my leadership, we go out there and we kick that ass and we take those names. So you see where I'm going with this.
Yes.
Snowball effects.
Yeah, you see where I'm going. So when we start to talk about culture, we can't ignore those types of things. Now, here's the question: who are those asses you kicking, and who are those names that you're taking?
Yeah.
And if you're not having a fair distribution of how you police,
Yep.
if you're not policing based on the 4th Amendment and the 5th Amendment,
right,
and if your actions can't be supported by the 14th Amendment, and if you're out there making contact with people and creating life-changing decisions for people, and you don't even know the basis from which your authority comes from, right? Now, you think the average citizen who hasn't really done something that rises to the level to have you violate their rights are going to cozy up to you?
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow.
You think when I have to go through thousands of dollars of legal processes, and that puts a strain on my family,
right?
You think when you come knocking on my door because one of your members got injured, that I'm going to cooperate with you? Right? So when we start to talk about where that trust and where that engagement intersects, right, and where that whole us against them, you know, forms, and clearly it didn't form in 2020, but I'm just, you know, we're just bringing things up to date now. So when we look at policing today, in a nutshell, and there's so much I could say about this, but trust and believe society is changing the way that police are going to police them.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And I understand that the FOP, which I'm still a member of as a retired member, and you all are members, and most law enforcement officers are members of FOP, Benevolent Society, or some collective bargaining unit that has their best interest.
Right.
And police officers have a right to due process, like citizens. Police officers are not perfect. However, there are too many times where we don't have a second chance to get it right. Right?
True.
And so that's where training comes in, and that's a whole nother conversation. And I understand where the interest lies in police unions, right? You know, but we gotta understand something too, that police unions are very different from, let's say, and this is not to diminish any career field, but it's just to draw a comparison. If you had a bottle making factory and you know, you have a union that's advocating on your behalf for working conditions and things of that nature, And that company has some agreement with that union. That's very different. There's some similarities, but that's very different from the agreement that police unions have with the citizens,
Right.
The elected officials. You know, and so the recourse is very different too when you're not satisfied with working conditions, because, you know, pretty much across this country, you're not going to see police officers go out on strike.
Right.
You know, you may see them do this whole thing with calling out with the blue flu.
Right.
You may see what people proverbially call taking a knee, where police officers aren't, you know, necessarily enforcing and things of that nature. So the FOP is a very strong lobby. It serves its purpose, and as much as we want to root out officers who don't belong in the field, because we always talk about the bad officer. Sometimes it's not always the bad officer and bad actors.
Right.
It's the person that just isn't cut out for the field.
Right.
That isn't cut out for, like, you know, I'm not going down to Hopkins to the neurosurgeon operating room because I'm not cut out
Right.
brain surgery.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Even if I took, you know, a chance at it, and then like, no, you know, this is not for you.
Right.
And so we have to have the courage in this career field sometimes to convey that message to people when they just are not. And it's not to say that people can't develop and form themselves. I wasn't always the officer that I felt I became.
Right.
There was a learning curve, but I had to have some interest.
You had something in you, though.
Yeah.
You
had to have some interest.
Yeah.
Right.
And I had to have some interest in doing the job right.
Yeah.
So
doing it right.
Yeah.
So just real quick, you know, you kind of touched on it, you know, talking about the laws and you know, like people's rights. Do you believe like constitutional law, right? Is that a big thing that needs to be reinforced?
Yeah. So constitutional, more specifically, constitutional policing is extremely important.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about people's constitutional rights.
Right.
We also are talking about sort of a roadmap that helps guide police in doing their job.
Right.
And being able to do it effectively, and understanding what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, understanding the different levels of engagement when you believe that something is happening, is about to happen, or has happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Making sure that when we have officers on the street, they understand that reasonable suspicion and probable cause are not one and the same.
Right.
You know. And you know, and we need officers on the street who really understand the Fifth Amendment, who understand the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah.
You know, a citizen's right to be free of unreasonable search and seizure.
Right.
A citizen's right to know, like, why are you stopping
me?
You know,
that's another thing.
I've seen video, and as you all know, I was also a law enforcement trainer. An instructor.
Right. And
so, you know, I've seen video where people are stopped by this is real stuff. People are stopped by law enforcement officers, and like they ask repeatedly, why am I being stopped?
Right. Yeah.
Or if you want to search, what are you searching for?
Right.
Yeah.
And so we need to understand what those differences are under the Fourth Amendment, and what those implications are if they're violated.
Right.
And so when we talk about reasonable suspicion can't just be some hunch. It can't just be because you got some spidey senses growing up there.
I know they,
I know things that I've heard, you know, police officers saying. And it's not to say that those things don't exist.
Right.
But spidey senses aren't, you know, that's not constitutional.
Yeah, you can't use that in the court.
So when you start talking about reasonable suspicion, and officers on the street should be able to regurgitate this very easily. It's based on facts.
Exactly.
It's based on facts. Some facts that lead up to your suspicion.
Yeah.
Not I'm suspicious because he's wearing a purple shirt.
Right.
Yeah. I'm suspicious because
and everybody else at the market has on a yellow shirt today, right. But this guy has on a purple shirt, so
he's got to be up to something.
So it has to be based on fact,
right?
And it's okay if you can articulate what those facts are. They need to make sense. They need to make sense to a reasonable and prudent person,
right?
Right. And so if you need to go, the next level up for probable cause, because now when you've put those facts together, right, they give you a probable reason to believe that a crime is about to be right. Or is being committed. And being able to articulate that. Now, sometimes what I'm seeing is we don't even get an opportunity to really get into that. And unfortunately, citizens don't get an opportunity to exercise their rights because for some reason we're in this era of policing where many officers go 0 to 100. Many officers have a belief that a citizen has to comply with me no matter what I say to him.
You know what? I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that.
Where does that come from? You got to do exactly what I told you to do when I told you to do it because I'm the police.
Exactly.
Somewhere they're learning that.
Yes. And that's what I was going to say. That comes back to having a good field trainer. Because just like you said when you was first talking, and you was talking about the sergeant. If that officer he's a kick-ass officer, and then next he goes to a sergeant. Same thing with a good field trainer. If you got that field trainer that got that mentality, where as though he like, I don't care who you are, I'm wearing this badge, I got this gun, I got on this uniform, you're gonna do what I tell you to do, and no questions asked. That's what he's gonna train that other officer to do. So that other officer who's brand new, coming out the academy fresh, got piss and vinegar in him, like, oh yeah, I'm ready to get out here. And when he's telling him that's what's sticking in his head.
You're right.
And that's when we get the situations we have now that's going on.
And instead of reproducing a professional who protects the constitutional rights,
exactly,
you start to reproduce someone who violates on those rights. Right? And
preach.
I mean, we can't ignore the fact that at least what's playing out before our eyes, that black and brown people are disproportionately impacted.
So true.
By those types of behaviors. So we can't ignore that.
We can't.
All three of my sons are black men. And so is my daughter. And so am I. Guess what I know? And as much as I have been in law enforcement my entire adult life, there's never a time that I leave my house and believe that I'm somehow immune.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
To the risk of encountering a police officer.
Talk about it.
Who may not know how to constitutionally police. I could encounter a police officer who may not give a damn about constitutionally policing. And I could encounter a police officer who, and people don't want to talk about this, is afraid of his own shadow.
There you go.
And so because he's afraid of his own shadow, I could somehow become some collateral consequence.
Exactly.
Because people in the career field who are afraid exist.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Right? No doubt about it.
And so there's a lot of things. Now, let me say this. It's becoming difficult to have this argument about, but they aren't all bad. Now, you guys are still active duty police officers. I have a great deal of respect for you.
Thank you.
I know that you are extremely competent, able, and willing. I know that you constantly seek knowledge. We've had many conversations.
Yes, sir.
You want to improve your craft, and there's always room for improvement.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Always.
Like, I know that exists. But I can tell you that being a member of the society, the greater society at large, people tired of hearing that few bad apples.
They are.
Because they're saying if you got some bad apples, fix it.
Fix it.
Why your bad apples got to be killing my folks and violating my folks and all this other stuff? And then, then I got to hear about their right to due process, but my family member didn't get their Fifth Amendment right to due process.
They tired of hearing about the off-season admin leave
where the 14th Amendment of the Constitution said the state, will ensure that I have access to due process. But then there are these activities that are taking place on video and on camera, and there's no right to due process.
True.
Right?
True. Yeah.
And then we fall back as law enforcement professionals and say, well, we're not all bad. Well, people tired of hearing that argument.
People tired.
Yeah.
Chris Rock, I was watching a Chris Rock special last year sometimes, and he said something that it had some humor, but it was so profound. When you start talking about police agencies saying that, or even police officers, well, we're not all bad, it's just a few bad apples. The rest of us are good. He said, could you imagine going to the airport and you step up to the counter and the person greets you and says, welcome to XYZ Airlines. Most of our pilots are good. We only have a few that like to fly into the side of mountains, but 80% of them want to get you to your destination safely.
That's true. You would look like what?
Would that be acceptable to you?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
That wouldn't be acceptable to you.
Not at all.
And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to it and I'm like, geez, that's so profound.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to fly on your airline at all, because there's at least a 20% chance that you got a pilot that don't mind flying into the side of the mountain.
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to get that 80%.
Yeah.
So here's where society is saying, I don't want to deal with your police department at all.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about the good guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because there's a percentage of your department, and I don't know who they are until I encounter them.
Right.
And if you're not having checks and balances, if you're not educating and building capacity in your officers, and you're not holding them accountable, and you're not holding them to a standard, and believe you me, not only are police held at a higher standard, they should be.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because law enforcement officers, let's face it, are given a tremendous amount of authority and responsibility.
That's so true.
There are only a few occupations in this world where you're given a constitutional authority to make a split-second decision as to whether somebody lives or dies.
Yeah.
So who wants to hear about a few bad apples?
Right.
Yeah.
And take people freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. Take people freedom. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
One of the few occupations.
Yeah.
Right? Where you can, give a person a loss of freedom. You can tell a person you're detained.
Right.
You're not getting back in your car. You're not going back to your house or what have you. Right? So that's a tremendous amount of responsibility. So guess what? Where there's a tremendous amount of responsibility, there has to be a tremendous amount of accountability.
That's right.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
true.
There has to be a tremendous amount of education.
Right.
Now, we can let the elected officials off the hook.
There we go.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah.
Can't let them off the hook.
Yeah.
We're the most, and I don't knock elected officials. I mean, hell, I ran for office, right?
Right.
I went out and I created a platform and I asked voters to vote for me, right? And politics at its core is give and take. So I have nothing against politicians, and we need lawmakers, we need policymakers, we need people to establish ordinances. But most politicians, at least at the local level, at least in urban areas, almost always part of their platform is what? Stomping out crime.
Yeah.
We're going to get this crime under control. I'm going to be what? I'm going to be tough on crime.
Yeah, that's the main.
What exactly does that mean?
Man said, you're going to be tough on crime.
And you're a politician with a nice suit on, right?
Right.
Well-groomed, very articulate, and you going in your office.
Right.
So who's going to carry out?
Who's going to carry out? There you go.
Who's going to carry out your mandate?
Who's carrying it out?
So true.
Police department's carrying out your mandate.
There you go. That chief that's under you.
Yeah.
And that chief, or that commissioner is going to carry out your mandate.
Your mandate, yep.
Right?
So true. That's true.
That chief and that commissioner's budget is controlled.
Yep.
by you.
Yeah.
And those who make up that political body, that political structure.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not trying to be cynical when I say that. Those
it's
are just
real.
the facts.
It's
just the fact. I'm not
That's
saying these things with any type of cynicism or malice. It's just if we're gonna have a real conversation about this stuff, if we're gonna really talk about what police reform looks like. Police reform doesn't look like police just reforming themselves.
Right.
Police reform deals with laws.
Yeah.
Right. It deals with those people who have stewardship, those people who have the fiduciary responsibility to create ordinance and to pass laws. Police departments don't pass laws.
Right.
That's it. And that's the main
true.
thing.
Yeah.
Now, we got to also understand this. By its very nature, the job of policing brings you in touch with people typically based on some conflict.
Right.
Not always, but
but
typically when you're called and that radio goes off.
Yeah, it's an issue.
Typically you're not being called because, Miss Mabel baked pies for all the cops, and
right.
And that's happening 3 or 4 times. So the dispatcher say, "Hey, Miss Mabel got them pies again. Y'all better get over there." No, typically when that radio goes off because you're responding to some issue, some societal issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so I will say this, that in general, police don't create the problems in society
Right.
that they are expected to respond to.
Right.
So when you talk about reform, right, police have to be at the table when we talk about how we mitigate situations with people who are in mental health duress.
Yeah.
Right.
When we talk about the social issue of homelessness,
Yeah.
when we talk about how joblessness impacts communities, right?
Right.
And when we talk about how access to resources are limited, when we talk about, especially with us, as when we were all school police officers, so when we talk about a child who doesn't have the parent, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't have the emotional intelligence, the social intelligence,
Right.
And this is not to demean them, but they haven't had that type of capacity for one reason or another. And then their child is on the way to school and stops and gets a box of Annihilators and a bag of potato chips,
Right.
and a pineapple soda, and consumes all of that before homeroom.
Yeah.
And then you try and wonder why the hell he can't sit still.
Yeah, right. You got all this sugar in him right now.
Right.
Yeah.
When you're talking about children who live in communities, and I'm talking about children the age of my son, 13 or younger,
Right.
and this is real. When you're talking about children who live in communities where if I'm a stranger to the community and I ask that 13-year-old where I can go purchase some fresh fruit and vegetables,
Right.
Yeah.
and they can't tell me.
Yeah.
But if I ask them where I can go and get a firearm, and I got $300 on me,
Right.
they probably can jump on their bike and take you.
Yeah. That's
So we're talking about communities where you can get a gun quicker than you can get some fresh fruit.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when we talk about reform, we got to have people who understand all of these things
Play a part.
that tie in
Right.
to the expectation that we have as law enforcement officers to respond
Right.
to these things.
Right.
Right? I watched that video footage of Elijah McClain, and it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no reason for that young man to lose his life. No, absolutely no reason.
Yeah.
There was really hardly any reason for him to even be
stop.
detained. Now,
Yeah.
the stop part, okay, because it's kind of sketchy, but some people called because he had a face mask on, But
Right.
it wasn't like he was listen, we're in the pandemic, and not only that, it wasn't like it was 90 degrees outside and the kid's going about his way. So even if there was some stop, and you have some conversation and you let the kid go on about his way, then he continues to live.
Yeah.
Right.
And viewing that video, I saw a whole lot of incompetency. I saw a whole lot of carelessness.
Yeah.
And society is measuring those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're measuring those things.
Mm-hmm.
which is why they tired of hearing this BS about just the good ones and the bad ones and all this stuff. We got to clean it up.
Got it. Yeah, something had to be done. So real quick, what is your take on we talk about police reform, but there's also been calls to actually defund like police departments.
Yeah.
We kind of touched on like some want to abolish them, right? But there's some like talking about defunding.
Right.
So I think I've already stated I'm not in favor for abolishing police departments. No, don't abolish. No.
Yeah.
I got family all over the country.
Yeah.
I don't want my Aunt Ethel to be in her house and the fools that live nearby know that there's no police coming.
Yeah.
And target my Aunt Ethel. No.
Yeah. We got to think about that stuff.
Yeah. Now, with regard to police, defunding the police, that's interesting because that means a lot of things to a lot of different people.
Yeah, and that was great. I was going to ask you that. Like, when we talk about defund the police, there's people who, in their mindset, it's so many different meanings. There's no direct meaning of what that means, right?
None.
There's some people out there thinking defund the police is actually abolishing police.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And defunding police means like taking away a significant amount of money that is giving by municipalities to police departments is taken away, and it's kind of like it's so up in the air.
Yeah.
So let me just give it to you like real world experience.
Yeah, right.
So as a leader within the Baltimore City School Police Department, we yeah,
right. That thing been gone.
Yeah, we came up against many obstacles, and I will tell you, if you want a case study for policing, the Baltimore City School Police Department is a prime candidate for a case study in multiple areas, right? Because before we get to defunding, they disarmed. They disarmed. They disarmed our officers.
They did.
And that's a whole nother conversation.
Oh my goodness.
For a whole nother show. And there were a lot of falsities. There was a lot of misinformation. There was a strong disinformation campaign. To make that happen. And my core issue with that was, if you solidly stand on an ideological viewpoint, if you're passionate and you feel strong about something, the argument that you have should be able to stand on its face.
Right. Stand on its own.
And my issue with the forces that we came up against in the Baltimore School Police Department disarming discussion, that whole conversation was so based into misinformation and disinformation, non-factual information. So I lost respect for a lot of people who were on the other side of that argument, because if the public didn't know, I was close enough to this thing to know. I was competent enough. I was knowledgeable enough. I was aware enough to know that you're lying. You're not being honest.
Exactly.
You're not being truthful. You're building your argument on false information. You're building your momentum on disinformation, which is so pervasive now. They were ahead of their time, because that's all we see all over social media now, right? These disinformation campaigns. So my hat is off to them, because they were kind of on the leading edge of being able to propagate misinformation. And that's not to diminish their argument, right? From its foundational principles, right, where it started. Right, I can respect your argument for why you believe officers should be disarmed. I can come to the table and have a conversation, and we can have some discourse about that. Right. We might even be able to capitulate on certain parts of what your stance is. But when you start building it by attacking men and women, who have the best interests, who by and large are citizens and who have students of their own, children of their own in that same system. A guy like me who was educated in that system. My children were educated in that system. I've come back to lend my my talent and my skill set to that same system, and then you take that and you encapsulate all of that, and you create this fabrication, and then I'm supposed to like gleefully accept a total fabrication and attack. No, I resist that.
And that's
so. Now let's move to what happened after disarming. Defunding. Baltimore City School Police was defunded.
They were.
Right? So what are some of the ways that we were defunded? So, you know, most police departments are budgeted for a certain amount of people. Right. So without getting into like the actual specific numbers, so nobody can come back later on and say, you know, it was really 12, but you said 10. You know, so I'm not getting into all that, right? Because we know we got people out there like that. Right. So I don't have time. I don't have the time for that. Right. So here's the deal. If you're budgeted for, let's say, 100 people, and you got 30 vacancies, and you've been working on trying to fill those vacancies, right? So defunding can come in the way of, well, you know, the money that you have for those 30 vacancies, we're going to reappropriate that money, and we're going to move that money over here, and we're now going to utilize that money for this resource, right? And maybe when you reappropriate that money, it might still circle around to having law enforcement implications, because if you reappropriate that money for some training, if you reappropriate that money to develop some community resources, right, that can take some of the load off of police officers, and police officers now don't have to deal with certain things because we have some very capable people in the community where when I do respond and I do assess what's going on and I say, oh, this is not really a criminal issue. It can become a criminal issue. However, before we get to that point, why don't I refer you? Why don't I refer your family? Why don't I refer your loved one to this? Right.
Exactly.
So, am I totally against that type of defunding? Absolutely not. But here's what I am against. If you're perched up on a tree and you're a raven, and you're an opportunist, what I do push back on is, I see this argument, and I got this buddy over here that has this company, and I hear they're going to be taking some money. So I know so-and-so who knows so-and-so who can get my buddy that contract.
Wow. Yeah.
So when they defund and they reappropriate, we'll make sure our name's in the hat to get that money. And then I'll make sure I draw a really good salary and my buddy draws a really good salary. And guess what? When we looked at everything, we don't have to have any hard and fast metrics to show how successful our program or our organization is. We just got to show that we made an attempt to deliver the services. Right?
Wow.
See, that's the stuff people don't want to talk about. Right? And so, and that's kind of the stuff, if you're a chief of police and all that, that's kind of stuff, you know, that you get into those waters. Because guess what? Because if the guy who has the company is best friends with councilman so-and-so or delegate so-and-so, you get to running your mouth about that. Now you're starting to get flashlights and spotlights on my friend. How dare you? So when we talk about defunding, I'm not totally against it. I don't believe in the over-militarization of police departments. Right? We're paramilitary organizations, but I'll be damned, we're not military organizations. You know, so do we need to have some level of response when you have people who want to engage in all-out guerrilla tactics? Do we have the ability to neutralize that? Yeah, we do. Right? We do, because times have changed, things have changed. Right? So we would be ignorant if we didn't believe that we need to adjust to some of the things that we see in society. But sometimes you can have an over adjustment. And so, and then you know, the optics of over militarization does nothing to foster a good relationship with the community.
That's true. That's true.
So if the funding says, you know, we're gonna buy 5 more armored personnel carriers for our police department, And again, I'm just throwing out numbers just for the sake of conversation.
Right.
So if you're out in the world listening and you are, everything fits into a cookie cutter, you can't use this part to put in the cookie cutter. Right. So I'm just using words here. So if each one of those armored personnel carriers costs, $100,000, and you were going to get 6 more of them.
Right.
But you already got 2.
Right.
Right. And so you say, we're going to divert those funds. Those funds, that $600,000 is going to go into salaries for people who can man recreation centers, who can help develop programs for at-risk youth in our communities.
Yeah.
And as a part of building in those salaries as we defund this portion of the police budget, what are we going to do? We're going to reduce the opportunity of young people coming in contact with law enforcement, who may start to engage in things that are not healthy, that are not positive, right?
Right.
So we are now using that money, we're funneling that money over into some activity, right? You use some of that money to develop technology programs, not just a camp in the summertime when school is out, right? So you have some enrichment programs that are ongoing.
Okay.
And then you got to bring people who are fiscally strategic, that have that type of acuity. You have to bring those people to the table, and there has to be real serious investment with those funds that are diverted. Right? So I'm not even going to pretend to have all the answers, but you're asking me what it looks like to me. Right. That's what the funding looks like to me.
Right.
And is that going to work everywhere? Well, how the hell we know if we don't do it?
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
How we know if we don't try it?
That's true.
So as police, if we automatically push back on stuff, just to be pushing back on stuff,
Right.
just because we the police,
police.
you can't push me, but I can push you, right?
Yeah.
we can't have that. We can't have that attitude.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
And because what it does is it further perpetuates the prevailing feeling of society.
Yeah.
Like it's us against you.
Yeah.
And police bear some of that responsibility. Some members of the community bear that responsibility. Systemic processes are responsible for that. When we start to talk about systemic issues, I said it very early in the conversation. Police were required to enforce segregation laws.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So that whole conversation about defunding, if I were a police leader, which I'm not right now, but if I was a chief or commissioner, I really prefer to be a sheriff if I was in executive level leadership for a whole lot of reasons. But those are conversations that I would not resist. Those are conversations that I would welcome, because if it can reduce the level of negative engagement or negative contact that my officers have to have with the community,
right?
If it can produce opportunities for positive engagement, right? Then that defunding conversation takes on a different life.
True.
And it breathes differently.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what it looks like to me. And again, I don't purport to have all the answers, but I did reach some point in my career where because you guys know me, at one point I owned a cell phone store.
Right.
I was a real estate agent for 10 years, and so I always, kind of. And my dad told me that. My dad was a cop in Baltimore City for 7 years. He's a detective before he went on the radio. Of course, you both know my brother and sister who are in law enforcement. My sister retired. My brother's active law enforcement.
Right.
So the best advice my dad gave us was, if you're going to take policing as a career, do yourself a favor. Find something else outside of policing, totally disconnected from policing, that you not only enjoy, but you can make a couple of bucks at.
Yeah.
Because he said he saw too many police officers live, eat, and breathe policing.
Yeah.
Can have conversations about other things.
Yes.
And then retire, and then within 5 years, if you ain't living the police, then it's only kind of like, what you living? You know what I mean?
Right.
So he said, and that was some of the best advice that he gave me.
Yeah.
So what I did, I found other interests. I did other things.
Right.
One of our former colleagues always jokes me about when I had the cell phone stores, and but guess what? It also gave me an opportunity to engage citizens in the community on a whole different level.
On a whole different level.
Right? While making a couple pennies at the same time.
Yeah.
And then when I did real estate, as a part-time realtor, for almost 10 years before I went to grad school, I stopped the real estate thing when I went to grad school. I put my license on inactive. But my point is this. When I took off the uniform and I had to meet my clients and show houses or go out for a listing appointment, I couldn't be Sergeant Brooks.
Yeah.
I couldn't be Chief Brooks.
Right.
What Sweet Brown say, ain't nobody got time for that.
Right.
And it also affected my bottom line.
Right.
So all those things helped to shape my thinking. All those things helped to shape my worldview. And then after that, I felt a responsibility to impart that type of stuff to young men and young women in the career field.
Thank you.
Who worked alongside of me,
Very much so.
Who worked under my leadership,
and
who I also hope aspire, to rise to levels where you can make a difference. And the reason that I really started to hone my skills and decide that my trajectory should be in leadership was because I realized the only way to really be in a position to write, develop, and implement policy is to be at the top.
It's true.
Yeah.
The way to have and hold the utmost accountability for those who work under your leadership is to hone your skills and to be at the top, and not be at the top just for the sake of being at the top. Not being there just to say I'm in charge.
Right.
But I've ascended to this level. Here's what I need to continue to learn from you, because Lord knows you can learn from the folks, right? That you have leadership over as much as they can learn from you.
That's true. So true.
And
so
real
true.
leaders understand that.
Right.
Real leaders understand.
And unfortunately, what I'm seeing across this country are some people that I sit and I watch the TV and I listen to what they're saying and I go, wow. But you in that position. And you can't answer those questions. And not that you can answer everything, but by gosh, you got to be able to speak to the craft that you've chosen.
That's true.
The career field that you've chosen.
So true.
You got to be able to build capacity in your people. If you ascend to a level of leadership and you're not pouring anything into anybody and you're just holding that position, if you're not able to affect change or don't believe that you can affect change, and you don't even have the wherewithal to at least surround yourself with people that can affect change, then at that point you become a placeholder.
That's true. Oh man.
Yeah. So Chief, man, you dropped some gems today. You took us
jewels on us.
Coop said, take us to church. You went to church on us today, man.
Yes,
we really appreciate you coming through. We didn't get to all the, we had a lot of questions. We got to bring you back.
Definitely.
Love to come back.
Because we really enjoyed this conversation, and it was absolutely great. Great conversation, and man, from the bottom of my heart, I love you and I appreciate you.
Yes, indeed.
I love you right back, and I appreciate you right back.
Hey, that comes from both of us on that one.
And I want you guys to continue to be safe out there. To members of the law enforcement community, stay safe. Continue to build your knowledge base. Continue to work on improving your understanding of the community that you're policing.
Yes, sir.
It's very, very dangerous and detrimental to enter a community that you don't understand, that you have no desire to understand, but then take all the power and authority that's given to you into that community.
That's true. That's so true.
You place the community at a huge deficit. And what we're seeing is black and brown communities who already have their fair share of problems. Listen, I grew up in Park Heights. A lot of stuff going on in Park Heights, I couldn't blame the police when I saw it, right? So that means we have our fair share of challenges and issues.
Right.
We don't need you to bring in competency and power into our communities and exponentially magnify those deficits that we already have in our communities.
That's true. That's true.
So thank you, gentlemen, man.
Look, like I said, like we said, Chief Brooks, from me and Randy, we want to tell you thank you so much for coming through. Like I said, we are definitely gonna have you back because you dropped some jewels on us today, and on the public also. To everyone out there, we want to tell you guys thank you for tuning in. Hey, enjoy yourself. Take what was said today. Please take it with you. Yes. Keep it under your hat. Yes. Always know that you have rights. You have rights when being stopped by a police officer. You have rights to know what's going on.
That's right.
All right.
So continue to live your lives. Enjoy yourselves. God bless y'all. Talk to you in the next one.
See you.
Thank you.
That's right. Oh, Chief, thank you so much.